In a world of flickering neon and cold steel, we are all searching for a moment of genuine connection. Join our community as we explore the beauty of human fragility through stunning 3D visuals and deeply moving narratives. Hit subscribe now and stay connected to the light.
The morning my brother got promoted to regional manager, my mother called me 4 times before noon. I remember because I was in the middle of a performance review at work. My own performance review, the one where my supervisor told me I'd been selected for a special projects team that could put me on track for a senior role. I silenced the phone twice. By the third call, I felt that familiar pull in my chest, the one I'd trained myself to ignore for years. By the fourth, I stepped out of the conference room and answered. "Did you hear about your brother?" she said. "No, hello. I'm in a meeting, Mom. He's regional manager now. We're taking him to dinner Friday. Morton's, you should come." I went back into the conference room. I smiled at my supervisor. I said thank you for the opportunity, and I did not mention, not once, that nobody had called me 4 times before noon when I got into graduate school on a full scholarship. Nobody took me to Morton's when I paid off my student loans 2 years ahead of schedule. There was no family group text when I closed on my apartment. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old, and I am the oldest of 3 children. My brother is 28. His name is Ryan. My sister is 24. Her name is Jess. For as long as I can remember, I was the responsible one. The one who set the example. The one who was expected to figure things out on her own because, as my father used to say, Claire doesn't need as much help. She's always been fine. Fine. I heard that word my whole life. Claire is fine. Claire will figure it out. Claire understands. What they meant was, Claire will not make noise. Claire will not ask for what she needs. Claire will accept less and be grateful for it. I got a partial scholarship for college. My parents contributed nothing. I took out loans, worked 20 hours a week at the campus library, and graduated with honors. Ryan got a different deal. When he decided to go to a state school 2 years after me, my parents paid his tuition in full. When I asked my mother about it once, carefully, she said, "Well, you had your scholarship." As if the scholarship was a choice I'd made to inconvenience them. When Jess went to cosmetology school, they paid for that too. When she wanted to open her own studio 3 years later, my father co-signed a small business loan without a second thought. I know because I overheard them talking about it at Thanksgiving casually, like it was just another Tuesday. Nobody told me. I was not consulted. I found out. The way I found out most things in my family. By accident, from the edge of a room. I tried not to keep score. I really did. Every therapist I've seen has told me that scorekeeping is corrosive, that it keeps you trapped in a narrative of victimhood, that you have to let it go, and I tried. For years I tried. But there's something about being systematically overlooked that leaves a mark you don't even know is there, until someone presses on it. I met my husband at 26, through a mutual friend at a birthday party in Wicker Park. His name is Tom. He is the kind of person who, on our 3rd date, asked me a question I'd never been asked before. What do you actually want? Not what makes sense, not what's practical. What do you want? I didn't know how to answer. I sat across from him at a tiny Thai restaurant, and I genuinely did not know what to say. I had spent so long being the one who adapted, who adjusted, who made do with what was left, that the concept of just wanting something without justification felt foreign. Tom waited. He didn't fill the silence. I think that's when I fell in love with him. We got engaged 2 years later. He proposed at the Indiana Dunes, nothing elaborate, just the 2 of us, and a ring that had belonged to his grandmother. A simple gold band with a small sapphire that she'd worn for 50 years. Tom's family welcomed me like I had always been there. His mother hugged me at the door the first time I visited. His father shook my hand and said, "We've heard so much about you. All good, I promise." I cried in the car on the way home. Tom thought I was overwhelmed by happiness. I was, but I was also grieving something I couldn't name yet. We set the date for October, a Saturday. The venue was a restored barn outside of Geneva, Illinois, about 40 minutes from where my parents live in Naperville. 40 minutes. I want you to remember that. I sent save the dates 8 months out. I called my mother personally. I talked to my father. I asked if the date worked. They said yes, both of them. My father said we wouldn't miss it. In the months that followed, my mother called occasionally. Not about the wedding. Usually about Ryan. He had started dating someone new. He had a good feeling about her. They had met her, liked her, thought she might be the one. I listened. I asked follow-up questions. I was, as always, fine. 3 weeks before the wedding, Ryan's girlfriend moved into his apartment. It was apparently a big deal. My mother organized a small welcome dinner, just family, on a Sunday evening at the house. I drove out to Naperville. I brought wine. I sat at the table I'd grown up eating at, and smiled and asked Ryan's girlfriend about herself, and helped my mother clear the dishes. On the drive home, Tom squeezed my hand at a red light and said, "You okay?" "Of course," I said. He didn't push. He knows when to wait. The week before the wedding, I started getting a strange feeling. My mother's responses to my texts were short. My father didn't call to confirm timing, which he'd always done for family events. Arrival times, parking, logistics. My dad is a logistics person. The silence felt wrong. I called my mother on a Wednesday. "Mom, I just want to confirm you guys are leaving by 9 Saturday so you have time to—" "About that," she said. 2 words. About that. I have replayed those 2 words more times than I can count. She said that my father had been dealing with some knee pain, that the drive, plus standing for the ceremony, plus the reception, it was a lot for him. She said they were worried about the cold because October in Illinois can be unpredictable. She said they thought it would be better for them to watch the live stream. I had not told them there was a live stream. I had set one up for Tom's relatives overseas, and I had mentioned it to my mother once in passing months earlier. She had remembered. She had been planning this. I asked her, "Are you telling me you're not coming to my wedding?" She said, "Honey, it's not like that. Are you coming or not?" A pause. "We think it's best if we watch from home. You'll have Tom's family there. You'll be surrounded by love." I hung up. I sat in my kitchen for a long time. Tom came home from work and found me at the table and knew immediately. He sat down across from me and said, "Tell me." I told him. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Do you want me to call them?" "No," I said. "Don't. There is something uniquely humiliating about your parents not showing up to your wedding. Not because of what it says about your wedding, but because of what it confirms about yourself. Everything you spent years telling yourself was an overreaction, a misreading, a result of your own sensitivity. It crystallizes. You are not imagining it. You are not too sensitive. The story you told yourself to survive. That they loved you in their own imperfect way. That they just weren't good at showing it. That the favoritism was unintentional. That story cracks open. My father's knee pain had not stopped him from attending Ryan's company holiday party in December. It had not stopped him from driving to Wisconsin in September for a weekend trip with my mother. His knees worked fine for Jess's studio opening in the spring, where they stood for 3 hours eating canapés and telling everyone how proud they were. Tom's father walked me down the aisle. I want to say that more slowly. My father-in-law, a man I had known for 3 years, was the one who stood beside me before I walked toward my husband, He held my arm and said quietly, "You look beautiful. We are so glad you're ours now." And I kept it together. I did. Until we reached Tom and his father kissed my cheek and stepped away. And then my eyes burned and I just let them. My parents sent a text message the next morning. It said, "We watched the whole thing. You looked gorgeous. Congratulations to you both." I did not respond. The weeks after the wedding were quiet in a way that felt different from before. I wasn't angry exactly. I was done. There's a difference, and if you've lived through something like this, you know exactly what I mean. Anger wants something. An apology, an explanation, a confrontation. Done just wants distance. Done is finished waiting for the thing you were always waiting for. I went back to work. Tom and I settled into being married. We were happy. We are happy. That part is not complicated. My parents attempted contact a few times. My mother texted to ask if I'd gotten the card she sent. I had. I had not opened it. My father left a voicemail that said, in his specific way of never quite addressing the thing directly, "I hope you're doing well. Give us a call when you get a chance." I did not call. And then, about a month after the wedding, I received an email from a lawyer's office in Oak Park. "I need to explain something, and I need you to understand it clearly, because this is the part that people who haven't experienced it sometimes misunderstand." When I was 7 years old, my maternal grandmother, my mother's mother, set up an education trust for each of her grandchildren. The terms were simple. The money was to be used for educational expenses, and any remaining balance could be transferred to the beneficiary upon completion of their formal education. My grandmother died when I was 14, before I went to college. My trust was managed by my uncle, my mother's brother. He is a quiet man, gentle, careful with words. And I have known him my whole life. What I did not know, and what the letter from the lawyer's office informed me, was that my trust had not been dissolved after I finished graduate school 2 years prior. The remaining balance, a sum my grandmother had set aside decades ago, added to over the years, and never fully dispersed, was sitting in an account that had been, by all legal rights, mine since the day I completed my degree. Nobody told me. My uncle called me the night I received the letter. He sounded tired. He said he had been meaning to reach out but hadn't known how. He said my mother had asked him not to say anything, not to bother me with it. She'd apparently said because I was busy with work and wouldn't know what to do with it anyway. He said he'd finally consulted his own attorney, who told him that sitting on the information any longer put him in a problematic position legally. I asked him how much. He told me. I sat down. I want to be careful about how I describe what I felt in that moment, because it wasn't triumph. It wasn't vindication exactly, though there was something in that neighborhood. What I felt, most precisely, was a sudden, complete clarity. Like something that had been blurry at the edges for 31 years had finally come into focus. My grandmother left me that money because she believed in me. My mother had tucked that away, deliberately, and said nothing. While I was taking out loans in college, while I was working 20 hours a week, while I was paying down debt for years into my career, she knew. The transfer took about 2 weeks to process. I worked with my uncle's attorney and my own. Everything was documented. Everything was by the book. This was not a dramatic bank heist. This was a legal transfer of funds that had been mine for over 2 years, from an account I was the sole beneficiary of. But it was mine. Every dollar of it. Tom and I made a plan. We were methodical about it, the way we are methodical about everything together. Spreadsheets, conversations, writing things down. We paid off my remaining student loans. We paid off Tom's car. We put a down payment on a house, a small craftsman in a neighborhood we'd been eyeing for years, with a backyard and good light in the kitchen and room for the future we were building. The rest we invested, except for one specific sum that I earmarked separately. I had been awarded a scholarship in college, Partial, as I mentioned. It was through a local community foundation, funded by a woman who had attended my university 40 years earlier and wanted other first-generation students to have opportunities she'd had to fight for. I had written her a thank you letter when I received it, as required. But later, in my mid-20s, I looked her up. She had passed away a few years prior. The scholarship still existed, still funded by her estate. I made a donation to that scholarship fund, a real one, enough to fund a full year for one student. The way my grandmother's money should have been funding my education all along. I sat with that for a while after I submitted the donation. I thought about my grandmother, who I remember as a woman who smelled like lavender and kept hard candy in a dish by the door and told me once, when I was maybe 10 years old, "You have a very good head. Don't let anyone tell you what to do with it." She would have approved. My parents found out about the trust eventually, through my uncle. My mother called me on a Tuesday morning, 7 weeks after the transfer had completed. I was at my desk, at work. "I want to explain," she said. "I'm at work," I said. "Claire, I heard you," I said. "I'm at work." I hung up. I went back to what I was doing. My hands were completely steady. She sent a long email later that evening. I read it once. It covered many things. Her intentions, her concerns about me making decisions with money. I wasn't prepared for. Her sense that she had been looking out for me. That I should understand the position she was in. She mentioned that she hoped this wouldn't affect the family. She did not say, "I'm sorry I didn't come to your wedding." She did not say, "I'm sorry I hid something that belonged to you." She did not say, "I should have done better." I did not respond to the email. I archived it. People ask me, when I tell this story in pieces to people I trust, whether I feel guilty. And I try to answer honestly, because I think I owe it to myself to be honest about this. There are moments. Of course there are moments. She is my mother. He is my father. I grew up in that house, ate dinner at that table, fell asleep to the sound of the television from the room down the hall. The love is not simple to describe, because it was never simple. It existed, in some form. I believe that. But love that does not show up, literally and figuratively, is love that I cannot continue to rearrange my life around. What I don't feel guilty about is the money. Not for a single second. That was mine. My grandmother left it for me, for my education, for my future. The fact that it arrived late does not make it less mine. It just means I used it on a different version of my future than she imagined. A house instead of textbooks. A paid-off loan instead of a semester abroad. But the intention was the same. She wanted me to be free. I am free. Tom and I have been in the house for 4 months now. We painted the kitchen a shade of green that took us 3 weekends and 6 sample swatches to decide on, and I love it completely. The backyard still needs work. The previous owners had a dog and it shows. But we've started. On Sunday mornings, Tom makes coffee, and I sit at the kitchen table by the window. And sometimes, I just look at the room and feel, in a way that's hard to articulate, that this is exactly where I am supposed to be. My brother Ryan reached out in December. A short message. He'd heard things were tense. He hoped I was okay. He wasn't sure what was going on, but wanted me to know he cared. I appreciated that. I told him so. We're not close in the easy way siblings can be when they've grown up feeling equally valued. But we're talking. And that's a start. Jess hasn't reached out. I don't know what she knows or what she's been told. I've stopped trying to anticipate. My parents and I are not in contact. I don't know what that looks like in 5 years, or 10. I'm not making permanent declarations, but right now, the silence is not sad. The silence is quiet. And after 31 years of contorting myself to fit into a family that never quite made room for me, quiet feels like something I've earned. My grandmother's ring. She left me her reading glasses, which I still have in a drawer, and a note in her handwriting that said simply, "For my Claire, who will figure it out." I found the note in a box while we were moving. I keep it on my desk now, right next to my keyboard. Every morning when I sit down to work, I see it. She was right. I figured it out. I've thought a lot about what actually happened to me. Not the events themselves, but the pattern underneath them. Because there's always a pattern, and if you're willing to look at it honestly, it tells you everything. What happened to me wasn't random. It wasn't bad luck or a series of misunderstandings. It was the logical result of a system I had participated in for 31 years. My parents treated me as the one who didn't need, and I confirmed it again and again by not asking, by working quietly, by showing up to dinners and smiling and driving to Naperville and bringing wine. Every time I accepted less without saying anything, I taught them that less was acceptable. That's not blame. That's just how it works. The choices we allow, we invite. And I kept inviting it, because I believed, the way a lot of people believe about the families they love, that eventually they would see me, that doing more would matter, that loyalty would be returned. I was wrong, not because they were monsters, but because the system had no incentive to change. I was the stable one, the fine one, the one who figured it out. Why would anything need to shift? The thing that changes everything is when you stop performing fine and start actually being honest, with yourself first, and then with the situation. When I stopped waiting for my parents to acknowledge what they'd done, and just quietly dealt with what was real and mine and documented and legal, something in me settled. Not victory. Settlement. The difference between those two things matters enormously. I think about my grandmother sometimes. She was a practical woman. She didn't leave me that money as a dramatic gesture. She left it because she believed that every person deserves a foundation, something solid beneath their feet that nobody can take away. The fact that it arrived late, that I had to find out through a lawyer's letter and a tired phone call from my uncle, doesn't diminish what she intended. It just means I understood the gift differently than she planned. Instead of a beginning, it became a correction, a recalibration. Tom asked me once, not long after everything settled, whether I thought my parents understood what they'd lost. I said I didn't know, and then I said something I hadn't planned. I don't think it's mine to manage anymore. That was the real turning point. Not the money, not the house, not even the wedding. It was the moment I stopped treating their understanding as a requirement for my own peace. Resilience is not about refusing to feel the hard things. It's about feeling them fully and still choosing to build. Claire kept showing up, to work, to her marriage, to her own future. Not because it was easy, but because the alternative was to let their absence define the square footage of her life. She refused that. Quietly, methodically, completely. What you allow is what continues. What you build in spite of it is what lasts.